The next time you board a commercial flight and take the window seat, I want you to trace your finger along the edge of the plastic frame. You will notice that it is perfectly curved. There are no sharp corners. It is a smooth, continuous oval. For your entire life, you have probably assumed this was just an aesthetic design choice. You probably thought it was shaped that way to make the plane look sleek, modern, and futuristic. But what you do not know is that the smooth curve of that window was quite literally written in blood. If that window had sharp 90-degree square corners like the windows in your house, the pressurized cabin of the airplane you are sitting in would literally rip itself apart at 30,000 feet, instantly sucking everyone out into the freezing stratosphere. That oval window is not there so you can look at the clouds. It is a desperate piece of emergency engineering that solved one of the most terrifying aviation mysteries in human history. To understand why this shape is a matter of life and death, we have to travel back to the 1950s. The world was entering the jet age. For the first time in history, commercial airlines were building planes that could fly above the weather, reaching altitudes of 30,000 feet and traveling at nearly 500 miles per hour. The crown jewel of this new era was a British airplane called the Havilland Comet. It was a mechanical masterpiece. It was the world's first commercial jetliner, and it promised to shrink the globe. It featured a pressurized cabin, allowing passengers to sit in warm, breathable comfort while the air outside was freezing and completely devoid of oxygen. And to give the passengers a beautiful view of the Earth below, the designers gave the Comet large, elegant, square windows. It was the future of travel, until the planes started falling out of the sky. In January 1954, a de Havilland Comet took off from Rome, bound for London. 20 minutes into the flight, as it reached its cruising altitude, the plane simply stopped transmitting. It had disintegrated in mid-air, crashing into the Mediterranean Sea and killing everyone on board. Just 3 months later, it happened again. Another comet, taking off from the exact same airport, exploded in the sky at 35,000 feet. There were no survivors, no witnesses, and no apparent cause. The planes were brand new. The weather was perfect. There were no bombs. It was as if an invisible hand had simply crushed the aircraft in the sky. The global aviation industry was paralyzed with fear. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, ordered a massive, unprecedented investigation. The Royal Navy spent months dredging the bottom of the ocean to recover the shattered pieces of the airplanes. They brought the twisted metal back to a hangar in England and began piecing the puzzle back together like a massive, tragic jigsaw puzzle. What the investigators discovered fundamentally changed human engineering forever. They discovered a microscopic killer called metal fatigue, and it was hiding exactly where the passengers were looking, the square windows. Here is the terrifying physics of what happens when you fly. When an airplane climbs to 30,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure outside drops to almost nothing. But inside the cabin, the airline pumps in artificial air pressure so you can continue to breathe. This means the inside of the airplane is pushing outward with immense, violent force. The metal skin of the airplane actually expands and stretches like a balloon. When the plane lands, the pressure releases and the metal shrinks back to normal. This constant expanding and shrinking is called a pressurization cycle. When pressure pushes against a solid object, the stress flows through the material almost like water flowing down a river. If the airplane's skin is completely smooth, the stress distributes evenly across the entire surface of the metal. But if you punch a hole in that metal to add a window, the stress has to flow around the opening, and this is where the de Havilland Comet made its fatal error. They used square windows. When structural stress flows around a square window, it cannot make a smooth turn. The stress violently crashes into the sharp 90-degree corners. In physics, this is known as stress concentration. The pressure at the sharp corners of a square window is actually 3 to 4 times higher than the pressure on the rest of the airplane. During the investigation, scientists built a massive water tank and submerged an entire airplane fuselage inside it. They pumped water in and out to simulate the pressurization cycles of taking off and landing. After the equivalent of just 3,000 flights, the metal snapped. Right at the sharp corner of a square window, a microscopic crack had formed. With every single flight, as the cabin expanded and contracted, that tiny crack grew by a fraction of a millimeter. It was completely invisible to the mechanics inspecting the plane on the runway. But once that crack reached a critical length, the massive pressure difference between the inside of the cabin and the thin air outside caused the metal to unzip like a cheap jacket. In a fraction of a second, the roof of the airplane peeled open, causing an explosive decompression that destroyed the aircraft before the pilots even knew what was happening. The engineers realized they had to find a way to let the stress flow smoothly around the glass. They had to eliminate the corners. The solution was the oval window. By curving the edges, the stress is forced to distribute evenly around the entire perimeter of the window frame. There is no focal point. There is no stress concentration. The pressure flows beautifully around the glass, the microscopic cracks never form, and the airplane remains completely intact. The entire global aviation industry immediately grounded their fleets and redesigned every single aircraft. From that day forward, no commercial airliner has ever been built with square windows again. We live in a world where we complain about the lack of legroom or the quality of the airplane food, completely oblivious to the miraculous physics keeping us alive. So the next time you're sitting on a runway waiting for takeoff, take a moment to look at that oval window. You are not just looking through a piece of glass. You are looking at a monument to the passengers of the de Havilland Comet. You are looking at a flawless piece of mathematical armor designed to hold back the explosive forces of nature so that you can safely watch the world from the sky.